Well, welcome to another Bible Truth broadcast. I'm Evangelist Tom Gillum. I'm an itinerant evangelist that believes in expositional preaching. I like to do it line upon line, precept upon precept. I like to do it in a series form. I like to do it with enthusiasm. It's a joy to have you on these YouTube broadcasts today. I hope you have a Bible handy, a notebook, something to write with. You'll find our text today in Psalms 18. We have begun a series now looking at the six wilderness psalms in the scriptures. There's times when the psalmists would find themselves in a wilderness, a dark place, a narrow place, a place of insecurity, a place of unknown. It's often accompanied with pain, sorrow, heartache, and difficulty. We have found through our study of these wilderness psalms that God would use them as a leverage in the life of the believer to move us from a low place to a high place, to a place in our relationship with God of drawing closer and not distancing ourselves from Him. So we've been using these Psalms and preaching on this thought. My Lord knows the way through the wilderness. Doesn't know the way around or under or over. He just knows the way through. And as the little Sunday school song goes, all I have to do is follow. That's not always easy. We've already finished up Psalms 3. They're archived here on these YouTube broadcasts. And we notice there where God would use a wilderness in David's life to move him from fetters to freedom. Oftentimes, a wilderness wants to bind us up. God intends to use it to set us free. On our last broadcast, we began to look at Psalms 18. We notice in the title that David has been delivered from all of his enemies and also from the hand of Saul. During the times of running from Saul, some near 20 years of living outside and having living in caves and a rock for a pillow and the sky for his roof. It was certainly a time when David could have fainted and given up and thrown in the towel. He was as much king, Samuel anointed him, as he was when Saul died and he took the throne. But instead of fainting, God used this wilderness to move him from fainting to furtherance. Oftentimes, a wilderness in our lives will cause us to want to give up and throw in the towel, but God intends to use that wilderness to move us from fainting to furtherance. We've already noticed David's affirmation in this title. He affirms himself as a servant of the Lord. He's more concerned about his relationship with God than his relationship with the royalty of being a king. He affirms the text. It's mentioned already in 2 Samuel. It's established in the mouth of two or more witnesses. Then yesterday we left off of him affirming his testimony. After saying that he was a servant of the Lord, he says in verse number 1, I will love thee, O Lord. That is a love that only comes from God. It is an agape love shed abroad in our hearts by the Holy Ghost. Perfect love casteth out all fear. And there's a desire not to faint, but to go further. David begins to make 9 my statements about this God that he loves. Certainly 9 is the number of the Holy Ghost. The Holy Ghost is being shed abroad in the heart of David. That is the only thing that'll keep us going, is the power and strength not of our own flesh, because we'll be weary. Our bodies are wore out. They're pain stricken during a wilderness situation. And it is only as the Holy Ghost empowers us. And as Isaiah said, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall exchange their strength for his strength. And so David said, O Lord, my strength. Then he says in verse number 2, the Lord is my rock. Oh, I remember David saying, He brought me up out of the miry clay, set my feet upon a rock, and established my goings. Oh, how we can rejoice today that we may slip around on that rock through weariness, but we can't fall off from it. He said He's my fortress. He said He is my deliverer. Oh, if there is any deliverance from this wilderness, if we're ever to make it through it, it'll be through Him and through Him alone. David said, He's my God. Oh, oftentimes in a time of wilderness situations, we just need to affirm that He is our God and that we are His people, that He cares for us. He knows what's best. He is Elohim, the God who makes all from nothing. David said, He's my strength. Oh, how easy it is for us to wear our fleshly strength out. He said, In whom I will trust. I will find in Him my refuge and that hiding place. He said, He's my buckler. He said, He is the horn of my salvation. That plentiness is in Him. Then David said, He is my high tower. That high tower is that mountain there outside of Jerusalem where maybe 2 or 3 men can defend themselves against large nations. That is the emphasis David makes. He said, He is my high tower. He is my mount of defense that no one can conquer. Then David, as he continues to affirm his testimony in this wilderness chapter, he says in verse number 28 of this chapter, he said, For thou wilt light my candle. The Lord my God will enlighten my darkness. I see here that He is the source of light in all my dark places. Oh, how often in a wilderness situation we'll sense that the lights have gone out. But when God saved us, Paul said He stepped inside of us and said, Let there be light. God commanded the light to shine out of darkness. Oftentimes as we get into the Word, it doesn't take much light. I remember as a young boy being in Mammoth Cave, some a mile or more under the earth, and they cut the lights out. And it was so dark you could feel it. You couldn't see your hand in front of you. And the Smokey the Bear Ranger just struck a match, and it seemed like it was enough light to give you peace that passeth all understanding. Oh, when a wilderness situation comes, get into the Word, the light of God, and just a glimmer of light sometimes will enlighten your dark places. I notice also in verse number 6 of our text, David says, In my distress I called upon the Lord and cried unto my God, and He heard my voice out of His temple. My cry came before Him, even unto His ears. David is testifying of the fact that God has heard his prayers. When we know that He has heard us, when we have hit pay dirt, when we have wrung heaven's veil, we have what we have asked for. Old Matthew Henry said the only prayers that God answers is those prayers that are framed in the will of God. Oftentimes we concern ourselves more with the picture than we do with the frame. David is praying in the Holy Ghost. David is praying in the will of God. And he senses that God has heard his prayer. He says in verse number 9, He, speaking of God, bowed the heavens also, and came down, and darkness was under His feet. He said this God is so high and holy that He would have to bend down to look into the heavens, and there's nothing but darkness under His feet and nothing but light above Him. He said in verse number 10, he rode upon a cherub and did fly. Yea, he did fly upon the wings of the wind. He said this God is so mighty that he uses the angels, the cherubs, the guards, as a riding instrument, a vehicle. Oh, today we're told in the scriptures that we have two angels, two cherubs guarding us at all times. I wonder if those two cherubs will be parked in our garage, in our mansion in heaven. They will be our instruments of vehicles for moving about. I don't know about all of that. That's big today. To think upon those things will keep you from fainting and going further with God. David also said in verse number 11, he made darkness his secret place. His pavilion around about him were dark waters and thick clouds of the sky. Isaiah said that in a dark time he would give us the secret treasures of his riches. There's some things that you and I can only know about him in a wilderness situations, in the dark times when we cannot see. He said in verse number 12, at the brightness that was before him, his thick clouds passed, hailstones and coals of fire. This God is so mighty. He controls all the arrows of sorrow and trouble. He is in control of the fiery trials that come our way. Let us bow to him today. Let us affirm today, as David said, and said that I will love him. Perfect love casteth out all fear. Let us affirm today that he is our strength. He is our rock. He is our fortress. He is our deliverer. He is our God. He is our strength. He is the buckler of our trust. He is the horn of our salvation. He is our high tower. If there is any light in our dark place, it will come from him. And oh, as we affirm who he is and who we are in him, instead of fainting, instead of throwing in the towel and giving up, we will go further. And even if you don't even feel like affirming who he is, just lay in his bosom today. Just lay in his lap. Let him do with us as he pleases, and it shall be good. Well, it's been a joy to have you on the broadcast again today. Remind you of our study website, tomgillum.com. There we have weekly Bible studies. Several hundred are archived there. Have a daily devotional page there. We have an audio section. Also a hookup to these YouTube broadcasts, tomgillum.com. Also, if we can be of any help to you, have a prayer request. If you're interested in a meeting, I'm an itinerant evangelist. You can email me at tbgillum@aol.com. Thanks for listening to the broadcast today.